Hey everybody, we're Shayem and Chris, and this is Fan Team Radio. And we're back here again. New season, same old us, but preseason testing. Chris, what's up?
Yeah, it's race week already. You know, we just got through winter testing, but I'm back. I'm excited. Formula One is back. Man, I can't wait to see Hamilton and Ferrari. I know we've seen him in testing, we've seen him in Instagram, stuff like that, but there's nothing like watching him being on the grid. And we're going to be in Melbourne for the first week. This is my first time as a Formula One fan with the season starting in Australia. Everything's been Bahrain, which Sam and I talked about this for a little bit. Bahrain is like a good track, and it's like a nice track, but it's kind of like straightforward. There's not a whole lot to it, and Australia always has a lot of fireworks, and we got 6 rookies on the grid, or 5 or 6 rookies. I can't remember, so many. And now there's news is maybe potentially raining, and we're going to be in Australia, and there's new cars. Nobody knows. It's going to be, I'm hoping it's going to be fireworks. But yeah, testing is over. I'm curious what your thoughts are and where you think we are going into the first race.
Yeah, I mean, it's exciting off-season to say the least. It started, even before the season ended last year with Hamilton making his announcement, then Newey, announcing his departure. We'll kind of break all that down in today's episode. But yeah, I saw Lewis Hamilton and Ferrari red and knew that this was the natural progression of his career. Like, it just all makes a lot of sense. Oftentimes you don't see that happening, especially in American sports. When Tom Brady left to the Buccaneers, it's kind of a weird feeling. This doesn't feel weird at all. I'm just hoping the outcomes are the same for both Hamilton as it was for Tom when he left for the Bucks. But let's dive into it, Chris. So I got a couple numbers here after 3 days of testing. Even though the season's not going to start in Bahrain, that's where they decided to do all the testing. So I'm assuming to your point that it is much more of just a straightaway kind of track. Probably gave us some numbers here to be a little bit more reliant on to kind of project out at least the start of the season. So yeah, let's just get into it. I mean, I want to start with the teams first, Chris. I think there are some teams that consensus-wise across the media have touted some favorites. I kind of took an average of all the positioning from both drivers across all 3 days to use as almost like a rough guide mark for where they fall within the ranks, and then kind of I want to contrast those against some of the media favorites. But just coming out the bat, Chris, I know there's been a lot of speculation about where the top 4 teams are. It seems like they're going to be the same top 4 teams from last season. That includes your Ferraris, your Mercedes, your McLaren, and your Red Bull. Where does your gut tell you this season's going to go in terms of those 4 teams?
Yeah, I mean, everyone clearly has McLaren as the pack leader. They kind of were the pack leader towards the end of the season last year, and I think throughout testing we're seeing that that's very likely going to be the case. However, I do think that all 4 of those teams are going to be, the margins are going to be so minor that I think drivers will finally it'll almost be like a Formula 0 season between those 4 teams, and it's going to be stock cars very closely between those 4 teams, and it'll be up to the drivers and their resilience and their consistency. And
aggression.
Just aggression. Yeah, I think, if you watch Drive to Survive this upcoming season, like Lando talks a lot, and he talked about it a lot during the season, but he talks a lot about, getting his elbows out and learning a lot from Max, from his aggression. I mean, even though Max's aggression was never like a fan favorite between a lot of the drivers, and there's obviously a lot of pundits who give him, crap for it, it does win you championships, getting your elbows out and being a little aggressive and stuff like that. Because if the FAA aren't going to do race bans, if they're not going to punish that kind of behavior, that behavior will ultimately get you higher positions. So I don't think Red Bull will be the fastest car. I do think McLaren will be the fastest car, and then somewhere in the mix of the Ferrari, Red Bull, and Mercedes, very close second. But that doesn't mean that McLaren's deadlocked. I mean, we saw a lot of that controversy between Oscar and Lando and the favoritism for the drivers. Do they have a D1? Do they have a D2? Are they both D1s again this year? So a lot of that stuff I think is going to be hugely impactful to the results of the ending of the season. But man, are we going to have some fireworks starting the race? Like, imagine Lando gets pole in Australia in Melbourne, but he goes back to his like can't hold it in the first turn, and there's fireworks between these rookies. There's a big crash. Who knows? He might be DNFing the first race. So I don't know. I think McLaren's going to be the best car on the grid, at least at the beginning of the season. But we did see Red Bull last year as the best car by far on the grid at the beginning of last year, and then sort of fall back to the ways of McLaren. So you never know as the season progresses. But I think as we start, McLaren will be high favorites to at least get a few podiums, get a few wins, get a few 1-2s. But we'll see. We'll see how it shakes out.
Yeah, I think the internal chemistry between Piastri and Norris could potentially be the make it or break it for this team. Their car is incredibly solid. But let's just kind of break it down here, right? So cumulative positioning for McLaren across all 3 days was 18 places in day one, 27 places, and then 15 places in day two, combined as an average of 20 places. The lower the number, the I'm assuming the better the performance is overall. So they're holding a score average of 20. Ferrari placed 17 cumulatively the first day. Lewis's kind of first day back. Then Lewis just blew it out the water in the second day, so that a cumulative score of 5, and then 15 to round out day 3. So they're sitting at average of 12, just a shy above 12. And then Mercedes actually came in and actually blew the lids off from my expectations with having a rookie driver in seat to kind of spar with George Russell. So they came in at 9 for day 1 and day 2, and then 11 cumulatively in day 3. So their score netted out to be a 9.7. Red Bull, they had Liam in seat on day 3 and then Max in seat on day 2, and both day 2 and day 3 it wasn't both drivers on. So I want to put an asterisk next to this one, but cumulatively it would have been 11 places in day 1, 7 places in day 2, and 2 places in day 3, and it's a cumulative of 10. So I'm going to take that with a grain of salt, just knowing that not both drivers were present during day 2 and day 3, but just kind of given what the numbers are telling me here from a really high level, right? This is an exact kind of a science. It's just kind of what I'm using as my guide marker. Mercedes crushed it. 9.7 against Ferrari's 12.3 and McLaren's 20. Even though the media speculations are that Mercedes is probably going to be a definitive 3 or 4, the testing days say otherwise. And I know there's a bit of sandbagging that goes into this, so McLaren could very well just be kind of holding things in their pocket until they get to Melbourne. But it seems like Mercedes, and even in the hands of little old Kimi Antonelli, is a really stable car, and it seems like they got a lot of the issues of the past 3 years kind of behind them right now, right? To give those two drivers a car that they can both be comfortable with, both a seasoned vet like George, and then also someone that's coming into the reins as Kimi. So I actually have Mercedes number 3 right now for me. I have Ferrari at number 2 as well. Even though both of these teams' average is higher than McLaren, I'm factoring in a little bit of sandbagging to kind of get my confidence over the hump on Ferrari and Mercedes beating McLaren this year. But Ferrari came out. Lewis is still getting used to the car. It seemed like he got used to it very, very quickly. They only had a month to work with here, so they're jamming in as much as they can. But to put up a score of 12.3, where both drivers seem very competitive, they might be the best driver lineup that I have seen since I started watching F1, quite honestly. And you could take it back years, and there could be other driver pairings that can compete with this. But having someone like Charles Leclerc, who one lap speed, qualifying speed is pretty, hard to debunk. And then you got Lewis Hamilton coming in here, and recency bias tells us that he's not probably as strong as he used to be, but he seems to have a new fire under his kind of butt that's helping him really get comfortable with the car. He always has a smile on his face now, so I'm hoping that momentum rolls into the season. But McLaren, even though they posted 20 points on average cumulatively, they there's a kind of a qualitative effect that you need to take into consideration when you're watching practice, and that qualitative effect between the drivers and the car and the confidence level that Zach Brown has. It seems like they're, I'll have them first until they're not, essentially. And I know it's a long season, so there's a lot of room for change. RB got a lot of faith in Max Verstappen. Who doesn't, right? I think Liam is going to be understandably the anchor for this team. Hopefully, it's a lighter anchor than Perez was last year. And I anticipate it will be. The car looks stable, but like you mentioned, they don't have that advantage that they did back in 2021, 2022, Chris, when Max just kind of blew the lids off.
Oh, that was 23, yeah.
23, yeah. So I think those are kind of my standings and my confidence of the top running four teams.
Yeah, I mean it's gonna be fireworks, but I keep thinking, like, is this gonna be Lando's year? It was almost his year last year, but it's one of those things that if you look at Charles and Lewis, Oscar and Lando, even Kimmy and George, like, we have a lot of equal pairings and a lot of hungry guys fighting for WDC. And I just can't put Liam Lawson in that same bucket as Max Verstappen and all of these other drivers. So I feel like Max is going to consistently make podiums.
Of course, you're just kind of stating the obvious here, right, Chris? Like, this is, he shouldn't be put in the same bucket. He should be put in a bucket relative to other D2 drivers that Max has had in that seat,
Sure,
and you got to take into consideration the Albons,
I think it gives Max a huge advantage in the championship because unless a lot of these teams
But the question here, I guess, is, Chris, like, of course, again, of course he has an advantage. He's going up against a guy that says it's almost his second year in racing. It's not even his first full year. Well, this would be his first full year, but he hasn't had a full year under his belt. But I guess what I'm asking is, do you think the delta between Max and Liam is going to be bigger or less than the delta between Max and Checo?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I think Liam's going to perform better than Checo as an average. Maybe not in the early pairing of the two, but I think Liam will, on average, probably finish in the top 6, top 7. I think he'll, as long as the car is fast, I think he'll be able to keep up and put up good results. Probably get a couple podiums. Maybe a maiden win this season. It just really depends on how close the cars are. But I was speaking, like, overall, just like in the Drivers' Championship for the year. I think Max has a huge advantage because if the other teams don't pick a D1 quickly, I think Max is always going to finish ahead of Liam, and these other teams might, Oscar win here, Lando win there, Lewis Hamilton win, Charles win, unless they're like swapping for points and dedicating those. I still think Max might have a huge possibility at winning 5 in a row, even if the car isn't the best, just because of they'll always favor Max, and there will never be a decision to put Liam ahead unless Max is in the back. So I'm just curious how this is all going to shake out again.
I guess in a scenario like that where and you make a good point, where like team decision to favor one driver or the other and have a game plan that suits that driver more favorably, I think the only other team in the top 4 that can contest and be in a similar position is Mercedes, where they would essentially have George take the lead and kind of put all their efforts behind him to essentially debunk Max Verstappen. If it's a George Russell versus Max Verstappen 2025 and it's that close, I'll take that. That would be an incredible driver to driver rivalry. And they already have salty kind of feelings towards each other from last year. So that's something that I would actually invite into F1 is and really nurture that storyline if it becomes to if it comes to mature is the fact that Mercedes has their number one driver, by just sheer force of their situation. And then Red Bull is kind of in a similar situation where they had to kind of adopt a younger driver. Granted, and I agree with you, Chris. I think the delta between Liam and Max is going to be much less than Checo and Max, but it's not saying much now, is it? Like Max kind of blew the tires off of Checo last year, so I think we're both saying the same thing. But I just want to kind of get your thoughts on, in comparison, what would this season for Red Bull look like compared to what we saw last season. Let's change courses just a little bit here and talk about our confidence in the drivers, away from the teams, the individual performances of these drivers. What does your gut tell you here?
Obviously, I think Max is Max. We don't have to talk about him anymore. I think he's going to be super solid all around. He's probably the best F1 driver in a very long time. And that's saying a lot considering Lewis is still on the grid, but he might have fallen off a little bit. I do think that Lando is going to mature a little bit and be a little bit more elbows out. However, I don't think that he's going to magically become a flawless champion. Maybe he'll continue to develop over the course of the season and be more of that championship caliber driver by the end. And, it's very possible with the speed of his car that he wins. But I still think he's going to make mistakes. He's going to get a little hot and heavy in his head. He's going to doubt himself from time to time, even if that is much less than last year. I do think that he still has a little bit of work to do. And then, Oscar, he's a few years in now. He's developed himself a lot. I think he's going to put a huge challenge up to Lando and also every other driver on the grid. You might not have gotten to this episode of Drive to Survive. There's a moment with Christian Horner where I think Will Buxton or whatever asked him, or somebody asked him, like, if you could have, one of the McLaren drivers in your arsenal, who would you pick? And Christian was like, Oscar, like 100% dead flat, just like, who cares about Lando anymore?
Yeah, but this is years after this dude tried to recruit Lando Norris into Red Bull. So, how much of his word are you actually going to take?
Listen, I know it's probably mostly just shit stirring because Christian is a shit stirrer, but still, I would pick Oscar too. I mean, Oscar seems like the more higher ceiling caliber in the long run. Obviously, Lando has the talent now, but Oscar is still, newer. He's got a lot of developing to do in F1, but I think he has a higher ceiling of being multiple WDC in the future, as long as he always.
I think he raises the floor. I don't know if he technically raises the ceiling. I think their ceiling, and I mean, Lando's kind of proved his ceiling. He is a multiple race winner, so he can break the mold. I think Oscar has the potential to do it, but until you see something, it's really hard to tell, right? Even when you do see something, you could have a season like Sainz, and the team will go and kick you to the curb. So it's a harsh business. But I mean, looking into the numbers in this one, and I took the same kind of approach to the individual drivers, is kind of taking the mean of their 3 days of positioning within the preseason testing. So I'll start with Charles. Charles placed 4th, 3rd, and 9th, cumulatively 5.3. Sainz posted a 5th position, a 1st position, and then he didn't test on day 3. So with an asterisk, his cumulative score is 3. And then same for Verstappen. He had 3rd position on day 1, didn't do day 2, and had 2nd position day 3. So cumulatively 2.5. And then Russell did all 3 days, placed 2nd position, 4th position, 1st position. Again, there's a level of sandbagging here, and preseason testing isn't the end-all be-all of what's going to happen in the first part of the season. But given those numbers, Russell looks to be really putting it into high gear for this upcoming season. Probably, everyone knows the fact that in 2026 things are going to change again, and who knows what cards are going to be dealt via their engineers. But for right now, it seems like Russell has a really, really strong hold on his car. And when it comes to kind of just the field being as close as they are, and kind of all of them at parity with their respective cars, I don't know. I got a lot of confidence in George Russell going into the season, and Carlos Sainz putting a Williams in P1 like on day two. That's huge. Both drivers have a chip on their shoulder. Max, he can feign that he has a chip on his shoulder, and all the best ones do. Michael Jordan used to psych himself up before going into playoff games against teams that had no bad blood with him. He just told himself a lie and somehow used that as a way to get mad and aggressive. I think Russell and Sainz just have that by the nature of the situation that they're in. Verstappen, he has that dog in him, but what happens when there's other dogs in the same park? Like, is he going to be able to kind of fend them off the same way that he has been able to for the last year? And then Charles, like, same dog park, more like a really aggressive Pomeranian compared to those guys. He posted a 5.3, and that's respectable. But again, I think he has the ceiling to kind of overcome, maybe get into that sub two, that three category. But from just the first 3 days of testing, when you're talking about how comfortable drivers are with their car, and then kind of excluding the fact that some of them are sandbagging, I would say this year I have if I were to put money down, I'd put some money down on Russell to either definitely finish in top three, but maybe even finish top two, and maybe even come in and eke out his first WDC. And then Signs, I don't think this performance is going to keep up, but I'm hoping to be proven wrong with him and Williams. Verstappen, I wish he did that second day of testing just so I can get a more holistic look into him. But if I was a betting man, I'd probably say he'd probably post in the top four on day two. And yeah, so in terms of confidence in drivers, I'd say Russell, Sainz, Verstappen, and Leclerc. But on the flip side, the two surprises, and they have their own reasons, right? So Hamilton posted a 13th place, a second place, and a sixth place, rounded out to about a 7 average. Kind of makes sense. His first day with the car out on track, places 13. That's not cause for worry. The fact that he's able to make up a lot of ground and really put it on the line in P2 on day two, that says a lot. And then day three, he averaged out around that 6 marker, which might be more telling of how he's going to actually start off the season. Is probably going to be mid-high pack. And then Lando Norris came in first on day one, which was pretty great. Came in 14th on day two, not sure what was really going on there. And then posted seventh place on day three, so averaged out a little over 7, so just behind Hamilton. Both of these drivers, I guess, we were maybe expecting more. I'm not surprised they ended up where they did. Again, there could be an aspect of sandbagging that McLaren is going to be taking more advantage of, which is why Norris's place was so far lower than I was anticipating. But Hamilton's makes sense to me. What are your thoughts on the Hamilton Norris kind of like breakdown from their 3 days of testing?
Yeah, I mean, like, it's testing, right? So you don't know. Like, obviously, everyone's got different plans. Everybody's doing different things. Like, some of them could be doing long runs. Some of them could be doing quality runs. Obviously, you think that throughout the day they might be doing all of the above. So their fastest times technically should still be around the fastest time if they are putting a quality lap. But it's very possible that there's a lot of sandbagging, as you mentioned, or that maybe they didn't do a quality run at all in that session. Some of them split days between an AM session and an evening session. So it's just hard to really tell exactly where those results are coming from, or if they got the setups wrong. Could be anything. So the teams are doing a lot of different plans. They're probably not wanting to send certain messages, give as little information as possible to the teams. It's a very interesting thing in Formula One, just given the dynamics of motorsport and having to rent tracks and be in the same thing. You're trying to keep data proprietary and confidential, but you're literally on track, watching what the other teams are doing. You can literally physically see their cars, so it's hard to hide that, even though you do your best. So I don't know if you saw one of the days, all the McLaren drivers were literally the garage. Sorry, why can't I speak? The mechanics in the garage, they were all creating a human wall blocking the ability to see the flow vised McLaren, so that they couldn't, the cameras wouldn't catch what the results were of the aerodynamics of the car. So it's interesting. I do think that Norris is, if he was legitimately 14th fastest that day, is probably just setup issues, long runs, things of that nature. I do think on average for the season he'll be much stronger than that. And Hamilton's an asterisk for me. Like, I do think that Hamilton still has hammer time left in him. I do think he's still a 7-time world champion. Some would argue an 8-time world champion. And
I would argue that.
I mean, of course, like, listen, in 2021, we don't have to beat a dead horse, but Max and Lewis were both champion in my opinion. Like, they both had a hell of a season. They basically split it down the middle.
I'll let you believe what you want to believe, brother.
Yeah, 100%. But I'm just gonna say, like, I won't be sad if Lewis wins a championship and gets that 8. So, and I don't think Max cares about it. So we'll see. But yeah, I think it's so difficult to say because if that Ferrari is nailed on, I think Hamilton can get some wins this season. Maybe make a push for that 8th championship. Especially, I'd rather him do it this year than Ferrari make a huge mistake in 2026. But back to Hamilton, versus Norris, I think both of them will consistently be higher than average of 7th. I think we're going to see a lot of orange and red on the podium, little orange, red, and blue mixtures over and over again. It's going to be such a competitive season.
Do you think George Russell is going to beat both of them, or do you think George Russell is going to fall short of both Hamilton and Norris? How do you think that trio? I'm using George Russell as kind of my P1 driver here for the year, just kind of based on this testing result. But where do you think, if I were to tell you, Chris, where's George Russell, Lando, where are the 3 Brits going to land? Like, what would you say?
I mean, George is going to be, not just my bias against George, because I do. I hate that guy. Well, he's growing on me a little bit, and I really hate the fact that I'm saying that. It's pissing me off. But I think he's going to be consistently the last Brit. Like, I don't think George has shown time and time again that he's cracked under pressure. When he put it into the wall with 1 lap to go in Singapore, 2 laps to go. There's been a couple other instances where he's made a mistake and crashed out at the end of the race while he was in a good position or poised to win the race. That said, I do think he has what it takes to be a top-tier driver and a Tier 1 driver. But unfortunately, this is F1. I mean, this is what happened with Oscar Piastri. I mean, Oscar Piastri came into F1 as a wonderkind. Like, he was the guy who won every class he's in, the same thing as Andrea Kimi Antonelli. But it's like, you can't just go sit into F1 and win it your first year because you're against every other driver on the grid is of that caliber. So, I just don't think George has what it takes yet to put a perfect season together to win. I mean, we saw Lando would have won easily last year had he not made the mistakes that he made or the calls that he made, pit stop strategies that he called that were wrong, things that he did.
But I mean, you could just say the same for George, right? Like, if you're saying that his biggest downfall is his weaknesses from last year, which he needs to build on. You could say the same thing for Norris for the first X many years of his career until he actually won a race, right? So you can say that lessons must be learned, but then the same concept would apply to George Russell as it did to Lando Norris. But I hear what you're saying, that you're still not fully convinced that George could put a season together because it is a long season, and it sounds like from kind of your consensus is that. Or from your side of the camp is that George is probably going to be P3 out of those 3 Brits, and I'm assuming you're going to put Hamilton in P2 and then Norris in P1 out of the 3 Brits. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, that's pretty much where I have everybody. But I guess ultimately for me, it comes down to, where's the car? Like, did Toto and team, make another Silver Arrow this year? Like, is it a Bullet? Is it another W11? Like all signs point to not totally, but probably a
I
lot
mean,
more
Russ
non.
posted P2, P4, and P1. He's the only driver to be, I think, in the top four across all the days outside of Max Verstappen.
Yeah, I mean, but just similar to Max, I think George will have that advantage of, always being consistently ahead of Kimmy. I think Kimmy's going to have a very similar season to Oscar's first season. He's going to like show moments of brilliance and the reason why Toto, but he won't be consistent. Like there was multiple times in Oscar's first season where he like got his first podium, where he got his first, potential he could have won, and you were like, oh my god, Oscar's a genius. And then like mid season he was like P6, P7, P8, and you're like, what happened? So I think we're going to see a lot of the same things from Kimmy. So George does have that advantage of they'll probably favor George. He'll be consistently finishing ahead of Kimmy, I believe. We'll see what happens. But yeah, I mean, I'm going to agree with you. Like, I think George has what it takes to win a WDC, but the problem is like 4 or 5 guys on the grid, maybe 6 now, all do. So I think it's going to take a lot of consistency this year from any driver to win the championship. But I do think George has what it takes. I mean, we saw what he did in a Williams, multiple times where he put a Williams on the podium when it just didn't belong anywhere near there. So, well, he may surprise me.
Well, on the topic of Kimi Antonelli, let's turn over to the rookies because we got 6 of them, and I'm including Liam in that class of rookies. He might be like halfway between sophomore and rookie, but I'm going to include him in there just to kind of look at the stats. So Antonelli, when we're keeping the same kind of metrics going, right? He finished with an average of 7.3. He finished P7 in day 1, P5 in day 2, and then P10 to round out day 3. So ahead of all the other rookies. The one right behind him is Liam Lawson, and this is again with an asterisk of not driving on day 3, but he had a P8 and a P7 respectively, which nets out to about a 7.5. So just behind Antonelli even. And then you kind of have a bit of a drop off. You have Isaac Hadjar, who scored a 11.7 on average, and then Jack Doohan, who scored 11.3 on average. This ain't looking that great for Doohan. The fact that he is on par with Isaac Hadjar, who just literally got into an F1 seat. So the story this season is, when we're talking about pressure at the back of the field, Jack Doohan has a huge spotlight on him, and I'd be curious to see how he kind of rises up above that. I don't know him that well as a driver. I know that his dad was a pretty great driver as well, so a lot to live up to. But yeah, I think in the middle of the pack there is going to be Isaac Hadjar and Jack Doohan that are posting, just behind in 11th place. And then on the back end is going to be Gabriel Bortoleto, P12, P15, P16, nets out to about 14.3, and then Ollie Behrman, who just had a tragic couple of days of practice. So P20, P18, P17, not the sterling kind of resume that he was making himself to have the first couple of seasons that he was able to get into an F1 car. But that might speak a little bit more to Haas, and we'll get to that in a moment. But yeah, the breakdown essentially is Kimi Antonelli and Liam Lawson are kind of top of the leaderboards of the rookies, and then Isaac Hadjar, Jack Doohan kind of splits the middle, and then Gabriel Bortoleto and Ollie Behrman kind of rounding out the back end. What are your thoughts on these rookies? Do you think that these numbers kind of settle in a way that you feel relatively confident in, or do you think this is not very reflective of what you're expecting to see on track going into the season?
I mean, I think it's pretty in line with what we're going to see on track in terms of their placements, overall, just based on their talent, the cars that they're in. I think it's going to be
And
really
their
telling.
experience level, which is close to zero, essentially.
Yeah, 100%. I do think a lot of these numbers are indicative of the cars they're in. Like for instance, Gabriel Bortoleto, uh, he's in literally like a 4-year-old tractor of a car. I doubt that they put any money into this car, and knowing that they're going to get P20 while they're working on the Audi car for 2026. So, you know, Bortoleto could be, on Kimi's level or even better, and you probably wouldn't see it. So I think he's going to be consistently in the back of the pack, even with Nico, for a throwaway year. So it's going to be, I think the real tells are going to be how they perform against their teammates. A lot of them have very experienced teammates. We have Antonelli up against George. We have Lawson up against Max Verstappen. Hajar is going to be up against Yuki, has a lot of years under his belt. Doohan's going to be up against Gasly. Bortoleto is going to be up against, Nico Hulkenberg. All these guys have huge amount of experience. Esteban Ocon and Albert, like they're all paired up against mainstream F1 veterans. So I think they're going to have
Yeah,
to
I don't think,
prove
and I mean, that
themselves.
wasn't on. I mean, that wasn't on accident, right? That was very much premeditated, and that's kind of the signs of a team that is in a rebuild, or is in partially rebuild or a full rebuild, is to have young blood and some tenure at the same time, right? But that's why I want to compare them against each other. Do you think that this is going to be? I guess let me ask it another way. Do you think this is indicative of Kimi Antonelli being almost as good, if not better, than Liam Lawson going into this year?
It's for everything that I've heard about Kimi Antonelli and just the pure ability that he has. There's also a moment in Drive to Survive where we get to see like a behind the scenes test with Kimi, and he is the embodiment of raw talent. Obviously, that doesn't always manifest itself in different ways, and there's always potential possibilities of having things go wrong, or the car's not good, all those things. But I do think that Kimi just has a lot more raw talent than someone like Liam Lawson does, and I don't really like Liam. For me, doesn't give off good energy as far as like committed student of motorsport. I feel like he's a little bit cocky, and that might do some good things for him. He might get his elbows out. He did that with Checo.
Here
He's
with
trying to,
Alonso.
yeah, like flipping these guys off, getting into their wheels, and so that'll probably get him somewhere. But ultimately, I don't think it'll get him to the top. Someone who's just focused on literally being the best driver that they can be, which I think Kimi is going to be that talent. We'll see where it shapes up overall, but I do think that Antonelli has a much higher floor than Liam Lawson does. So I think that we will see him outperform Liam Lawson multiple times throughout the season, if not always.
How long do you give before Jack Doohan gets the boot? If you think he will.
3 races. I think I think Doohan's going to have to very clearly outperform Pierre Gasly on multiple occasions, because I think Franco Colapinto just had so much momentum going into him. Now, we saw him fall off a little bit, but he has a huge falling, and I think, Flavio he's a ruthless person. So I think if he doesn't see sparks and fireworks from Doohan and just kind of in the back of the pack, I think he'll be very eager to switch things up. And like, if you take Jack Doohan and you take Franco Colapinto, and if they're both equally bad, you'd probably rather have Colapinto in that seat anyways, just from the social media exposure, the access to merch, everything on a level playing field. You're going to want Colapinto in that seat. So I think Doohan basically has to perform at a super high level to keep his seat. That's unfortunate for him, and we'll see what he has with him. I think he did outperform Gasly a couple times during testing, but we'll see what happens on the racetrack.
Yeah, I mean Flavio Villatore, he has a bit of a helmet Marco kind of thing going on about him,
What
and even helmet couldn't get Checo out of the seat until almost the last couple of races of the season, right? So
Dude,
I
keep
think
watching Drive to Survive. Flavio is he's a character. I love the guy. He's
yeah,
crazy.
his lore precedes him, but I think Jack makes it to the halfway mark of the season. I think Ollie Oakes, the team principal for Alpine, is gonna probably, as a good team principal, it seems like you need to kind of have the backs of both of your drivers and kind of be that shield between them and upper management and ownership. And I think that's what Ollie Oakes is going to aim to do. Not even for just for Jack Doohan's kind of betterment, but to show if and when Franco Colapinto comes in the seat that like, hey, I'm a team principal that will stand by you. Now that you're in seat, like I'm gonna have your back. So I think Ollie Oaks' job here is to act as the adult in the room and kind of shield as much as he can. And I think by unless Jack Doohan just pulls a rabbit out of his hat, I think Ollie's going to get in there and probably try to mediate it and at least get him through the midway point of the season. I don't think Alpine really has anything to fight for here, right? They just want to make sure they keep Pierre Gasly happy and they figure out the D2 position. I don't think Pierre Gasly gives a flying fuck about the D2 position because they're not in a position to win a constructors cup. It's more like Pierre Gasly trying to kind of pad his stats at this point, and so he's not going to interfere a whole lot. I don't feel like, and I think he's fairly indifferent to whether it's Jack Doohan or Franco Colapinto in that seat. I think he kind of holds himself to a level where he thinks he's much better than both of them, and then he is. I think so too. But I think Jack's going to get at least through the midpoint of the season before he gets dropped off. Um, all right, let's switch positions a little bit to disappointments that we saw, right, based on the 3 days of testing. So the three that were starkly standing out to me, and let me know if you agree or disagree here, Chris, but Ollie Behrman coming in almost dead last every day of testing. I think this goes hand in hand with the fact that I have him and Haas as a team kind of in my disappointment bracket. Haas scored cumulatively 39th place, 35th place, 25th place because Esteban was able to pull out a pretty solid performance on day three, but still leaves them at an average of 33 positions. Uh, I I anticipated a lot more from Haas, and again, this might be. I want to say there's a bit of sandbagging involved probably with them as well, but not to this extent where they're coming in so far behind and both drivers are kind of performing very poorly against their projected kind of ceilings and even floors. So I have Ollie Behrman and Haas in my disappointment seat. And I hope that's not an indication of how the team's going to perform, because I think at their heart of hearts they are better than Stake Sauber, who has really nothing to kind of fight for. It is a bit of a throwaway season for them. But even being the second to last of the pack, even potentially behind VCarb, is not something I was hoping from Haas. But two new drivers and a team that is just getting their bearings, it makes a lot of sense. But given the upward trajectory that they had going into the end of last season, I was hoping for better. And then Aston Martin, right? Fucking Lance Stroll was out sick day three, so they posted a 31, 17, 15, and that's because Fernando Alonso was able to kind of slot in. But they cumulatively finished with the 21 position with the asterisk that not both drivers were available on day three. I know you have in your notes here the Newey curse, so I want to kind of give way to you to explain that a little bit more. But Aston Martin, it just seems like they fell really short. I think out of everyone, they probably fell the most short of expectations. And I know they made that pivot to their new team principal Andy Cowell from Mike Crack to kind of change things up a bit. Maybe not have such a technical leader, but more of a business focused kind of leader. Maybe someone that could implement processes in a way that would be conducive to a championship winning team. And then of course you have Adrian Newey, the airbender there, who's brilliance might not take effect in this first season. So we're just kind of waiting to see out what he has in store for next season. But those are my two. But those are my three disappointments: Ollie Behrman, the Haas organization, and Aston Martin organization as well. Any thoughts on that, Chris? I guess you want to expand on any of that, or do you have your own disappointments that you want to point out?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. Like I think Ollie Behrman's going to have a very similar path to Nick DeVries. I mean, I think he's going to sit in a seat for the first time in a Formula One car and have a huge spotlight shone on him for his performance. You know, DeVries did the thing in Monza, and then Behrman did it in Saudi Arabia. And I think ultimately his talents are just not going to be that great. I mean, I don't think Ollie Behrman was that great in F2. You know, even if their car had, had some setup issues and things like that, I just don't think I think he's going to be one of the rookies that just doesn't live up to the hype. So, and then Aston Martin, I totally just, Lance Stroll is Lance Stroll, and Fernando's getting older every year, and the car is, very likely. For me, Aston Martin has been, up until the point they got Newey, who literally just started this month, I think they've been a follower versus a leader in aerodynamic. So I don't think you're ever going to be ahead of the field when you're doing that. And so, I don't think we're going to see shines from them until 2026. And then Haas, we'll see where they end up. I think they're going to be sort of in the middle of the midfield, if not at the bottom of the midfield. I just don't see a lot from them.
I mean, what gives you hope that they'd be in the middle of the midfield? Because their testing results says otherwise. Even Alpine and Kick Sauber are kind of edged ahead of them.
I just think that Esteban has a lot of talent under him, and he's got a lot of fire and drive, and I think he'll probably do a lot to help shape the car. Obviously, I think Ollie, like I said, is just not going to be that great. So, I don't think they're going to be leading the midfield by any means, but I think they'll definitely be ahead of Kick Sauber, and potentially RB as well, just depending on how fast that car is. And then, Williams, I guess, is the big asterisk in terms of, I think their driver pairing is much more talented, but we'll see how fast the car is. Sainz really put it up there at the top and got that P1, but it could have been a sandbagging day for everybody else. We'll see where it is. Like Sainz said himself, don't expect any podiums this year, but we'll see what actually happens on track and how they develop the car over the year. But I mean, you're right. I don't think Haas is going to be fifth or sixth. They'll probably be seventh, if not eighth. So it's probably more in line of exactly where they're going to be ended up. You mentioned the Newey curse that I had put up here. So this is something I didn't actually know before, and when I was reading through some of the things online, and I guess all the champions that have driven and won championships in Adrian Newey designed cars have never won another championship after Newey left the team. And I'm wondering, do you think Max is going to break that curse this year?
I mean, it's hard. I think, and I don't know when Newey left those previous teams, if it was right before a major regulation change, because Max is still left with the excellent vestiges of what Newey left for him at Red Bull. And so Red Bull just has to kind of maintain at this point, right? And I think they have enough. They have enough smart people at their factory to maintain what Adrian Newey left them. So there could be a potential that Max breaks that curse. But I also believe in the Madden curse. So when it comes to sports curses, I think that Max comes in P2 and George Russell wins P1 and Norris comes in outside of P5. It's probably not going to happen.
You've said it like 3 or 4 times now that George is going to get P1, and I'm just like, where's Charles? Where's Lewis? Where's Oscar? Where's Lando? And all of this, I don't think it's possible that George Russell gets P1.
I don't know. I have high hopes for George Russell this year, and I would love to.
Fucking whatever he says.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see Lewis Hamilton or even Charles get P1. But Charles, man, he's been at this for so long, and he still can't seem to get a season together where he's winning multiple back-to-back, like maybe two, three back-to-backs stretches. That he's just, I think he's just going to stay. And having Lewis Hamilton join your team, that's I don't think it's going to shake him out of his boots because I think his willpower is stronger than that. But I don't think he's going to elevate into that next realm of being like the beast that you need to be to win WDC. I just don't think Charles has that mentally just yet. I think Lewis just being in a new team, he'll probably score some really really solid points. He might even get a P1, throughout like a handful of P1s throughout the season, maybe due to like rain or something. I don't know, like different things happen during different races. But I think that with the full force of Mercedes behind him, knowing that he has a. And here's another thing, right? So I think Kimi Antonelli is going to be able to push George in much healthier ways forward than Liam is going to be able to do for Max and Red Bull. And it's for the reasons I mentioned before, like Liam, and something that you mentioned as well. Liam has a way of driving about him that really reflects his personality, and it's kind of this like devil may care kind of attitude, and he's a bit younger, and that doesn't really align with how Max decides to handle business, right? So I think just by virtue of that relationship, it's going to be a little bit more contentious. And this is just me speculating here. I think the relationship that, or the environment that Toto's kind of created in Mercedes, and this goes back to our very early episodes, Chris, when we first started talking about F1 and recording it, is our team successes, like over the long term, kind of predicated on the culture that they build internally. And Mercedes and Toto Wolff has always built a relatively nurturing, as nurturing as you can get in F1, right? Of a culture than Red Bull has. And I think Liam's going to try to cut against the grain a bit there, and it could, the wind could blow back and no pun intended, but stifle Max a little bit. I think George has these multiple years of where he has been climbing steadily and has been putting Lewis in his back mirrors. And, this is going hand in hand with the fact that I'm assuming he's learned from some of his past mistakes and how to not fuck things up at the last second. And I think he's going to collect as much points as he can, with Kimi being a very good defending second driver, and happily so, right? I think that's, in a season where it's not all about just the specific car as it was in a couple of years past. This year seems like everyone's kind of up to parity right before the axe falls, and the regulations completely change. So that's what's getting me to think that George Russell is going to be set up for success, essentially, by his own sheer talent and driving ability, but also by the fact that the entire team's going to get behind him de facto, and Red Bull's going to get behind Max 100%, but Liam's not going to probably get behind it. That's just my speculation. Until Liam gets like kind of gets a slap on the wrist multiple times, I don't think he's going to concede. But first, he has to even just be in the question, right? Like if the season starts and Liam's like fucking P7, P6, it's not going to be enough to even bother Max, because Max can be so far up the road. But let's say him and Liam are kind of fighting, and Liam's not willing to be a team player, then it kind of is what it is. Whereas I think Kimi Antonelli's going to be like, you know what, I'm here to play the team game. He knows Toto's known him pretty much his entire driving life, as he has known George. So I think that chemistry, if I can kind of base speculations off of that, I think that chemistry tells me that Mercedes will George Russell will come in closer to P1 than expected. But then again, there's the whole Lando Oscar kind of side of the equation. I joke saying that Lando's going to be outside top five. He's probably going to be in the top three. If I'm being honest with myself here, the car's very good. Zach Brown has a lot of love and faith in him. I think Oscar, if Oscar has a really good start, then it might go back to the point I was making in episodes past, where Mercedes is going to be their own kind of. I'm sorry, McLaren's going to be their own. Internal driver relationship is going to dictate, their success, and in a very different way from Mercedes and from Red Bull, because they're really Lando's a clear cut number one, but not as clear as Max is at Red Bull and George is at a Mercedes. And then the Ferrari pairings, I think they're probably the most equally matched out of everyone on the field right now. So yeah, I mean, it's a long-winded answer, but I think that's my thought process when it comes to putting my confidence that George might be P1 driver this year.
Well, you should go put a couple $100 down on him if you're that confident, because I think it's going to be Ferrari 1-2 for the entire year, and they're going to be tied going into Abu Dhabi, and they're going to just fight it out in that last race, and no one else is even close.
Well, dreamers can dream.
Dreamers can dream, but we'll see what happens. But I think all these guys have the definite potential to win WDC. I think Australia and Melbourne is going to be very telling in terms of like where everyone truly is, and it's going to be fireworks. So yeah, let's why don't we make some predictions? We talked a lot about it, but let's just predict who's WDC, who's WCC.
My top three for WDC is going to be George Russell, Max Verstappen, Lando Norris. What say you?
Constructors?
Well, I want to hear your WDC first.
Listen, Vegas odds have Lando at number 1 at the moment, which is kind of crazy, and then Max Verstappen number 2. But I think Max is going to pull it off. I think Max is going to get first. Unfortunately, I do think Lando will probably get P2, and then 3. Man, I'm going to give it to Lewis just because I really want to see him perform. I think he's gonna I think this is going to be the year. He's in a new car. He's going to have a lot of motivation. I think he's going to put a lot of work into it. He's got what's her name, Angela. Back with him. Yeah. I think he's gonna be that guy this year, where he's the first one at the paddock, the last one to leave at the night. I think he's gonna put the work in, and it'll depend on the car. But I think Lewis is going to reach into that magic bag and figure out those extra tenths every time he can. He might put it all on the line this year and be out of gas next year, but we'll see what happens. But I think he's gonna at least go for it. So.
I wouldn't be mad with that. And I think for constructors, I think it's going to be McLaren again this year. Just the driver pairing is quite solid. I think it'll be Ferrari in second position. I think this is tough between Red Bull and Mercedes. I think it will be Mercedes this year. I think the anchor of Kimi Antonelli is much lighter than the anchor of Liam Lawson. That's just my kind of opinion right now, but I think that will start to creep its ugly head as the season progresses.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Last year at the end, even Ferrari, all the way to Abu Dhabi, had a potential to win the constructors. Ultimately, it didn't shake out, but it was still possible up until the last. Half of the race of Abu Dhabi. I can't disagree with you as much as I want to right now. I think McLaren is definitely going to win the constructors. I think we're going to have a little bit of another Checo situation with Liam, just maybe not that bad, but I don't think that he's going to be able to put the same amount of points. So I think the McLaren boys will be a little bit more consistent. So I think it's going to be McLaren, Ferrari, and then Red Bull with Mercedes in fourth. But again, we'll see what happens. But I think Max is going to eke this out, but we'll see what happens. And then, forget that. Who's gonna be on the top of Melbourne? Let's get your Melbourne podium to wrap things up.
My Australian podium is probably going to be. I think it'll be Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc, and George Russell.
That's definitely not a bad one. I'm going to agree with you on Max winning it. I'm just going to throw Oscar a bone because it's kind of his home race. I'm going to put him in P3, and then I'm going to put a Lewis Hamilton podium to start out the season to get people so hyped up talking about it. It's just written too good for Hollywood, so we're going to put Max Lewis. Can you imagine another Hamver? Oh, don't even get started on Bottas. We could talk 2 hours about that. But I'm going to be Lewis. Max Lewis is in Oscar, giving him a little nice home race podium.
All right. Well,
little spoiler alert, though.
I wouldn't be mad. I wouldn't be mad seeing Lewis up there.
I wouldn't be mad either. I was not a Lewis fan for the first half of 21. I became a Lewis fan at the end of 21, and now I'm a full-blown Lewis fan. Still love Max, though. So, we're going to wrap this up now, but I did want to touch on, we'll save it for another episode, who we think are going to end up into those Cadillac seats. Because I think, even though that's for 26, I do think it'll have a massive influence on silly season, rookie results, and all that this season. So I think just those seats being available are going to shake things up this year, ultimately having a little bit of effect how things go this year. But I'm excited for Melbourne.
I think it'll be Colton Herta and Sergio Perez.
If it's about the money, yes, maybe Perez. But, there's already talk about George Russell. There's talk about Bottas. The team principal of the team represents Zhou Guanyu, and he already says that it's potentially him. So it's like, who knows?
I don't think Joe's going to get another seat again in F1.
Well, he definitely doesn't deserve it, but that doesn't mean anything in this sport. So.
Yeah.
But, anyways, I'm excited. I can't believe it's race week already. It feels like it's been forever since we've been here, but Formula One is back, and I couldn't be more excited. So.
Yeah, I'm stoked for it. It's going to be a good season. I hope we just didn't jinx it by saying that, but we'll be back here next week to kick off the first real episode of the season.
Great talking to you, Cheyenne.
Likewise,
See
buddy.
you after Australia.
All right, bye everybody.
Thank you for listening. Cheyenne and I would love for you to join the Fan Team Radio community. So please like, subscribe, or follow on your platform of choice, and we'll see you next time.